Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Michael Sisco show. It's been a full week since my last episode because, I've decided to cut back a little bit as I am transitioning to my new home here in the great state of West Virginia. So where I get to play with my toys unrestricted. Oh, hang on. Yes. Let's go. Brittany, you didn't know I was going to bring the toys today, did you?
Ooh, that's super great. I am happily a registered gun owner myself, so go Second Amendment rights.
We don't need the register here. We don't constitutional carry.
Yeah, California though. Yeah.
Hang on. Let me set up, but yeah, you can just conceal carry without a permit here. It's crazy.
That's really amazing. That type of permit takes literally an act of God in California. It's crazy. Not an understatement. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, why don't we actually properly introduce you, Brittany Dumas? Is that how you say your name? That's how I say your name.
It's Dumas if you're going to be French.
Dumas.
Yes. Fancy. The consonant at the end of words are silent.
Are you French?
French Canadian.
Oh man, gonna have to kick you off.
I mean, can't choose my heritage. I can choose to like it though.
Yeah, you shouldn't like it.
I'm more Italian anyway, so that's my mantle when it comes to my ethno state. I'm like, I'm Italian. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
So you're African? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, Moroccan and Libyan, that's pretty much the majority of my DNA.
I'm kidding. I'm just giving you a hard time. But anyways, so who are you? What I know you have a podcast now. If you could just briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I am new to Orthodoxy, so I'm not even a catechumen yet. But I've really taken on this journey in a really serious way. And so I have a blog and a podcast that are arguably still in its infancy, although there's a good amount of content on both platforms now. I have a really interesting story, hence that's why you're graciously hosting me, Michael. But overall, long story short, I am fascinated by Orthodoxy, especially with the way in which it shares the fullness of the faith. And so I thought, why not help others who are in my position as inquirers, especially women specifically.
Nice. Gotta help the women. By the way, guys, if you want to send super chats, please use Entropy because YouTube is giving me problems with even getting my money from Google AdSense. So, because I moved. So, but anyways, back to you. So I know that, I mean, one part of what's interesting, we actually share a bit of I don't talk about this much, but I do actually have a background in the occult before I became Orthodox. I was involved in Freemasonry. I've talked about it a little bit with Michael Witkoff and Brother Augustine on his channel, or was it my channel? I can't remember, but similar backgrounds in that respect. I was wondering if you could describe to us your journey from feminism and occultism to where you are today as an inquirer to Orthodoxy.
Yeah, well, I should start from the beginning. I am a cradle Protestant, so according to Father Peter Heers, I would be what's called the Reformed Protestant, so I'm not a Catholic, but I grew up in that background, very charismatic, Pentecostal vibes, but mostly a non-denominational upbringing. So about 2010, 2011, I was starting to get pretty bitter for various reasons. And I just started seeing these layers of hypocrisy in the church overall, specifically with that Protestant upbringing and background. And it hardened my heart. And so it was literally through sin that I fell away from the church. Shocker. And so then I started to explore all these other avenues. And I was largely all over the place, but it didn't start out so chaotic. I started out treading softly with crystal specimens, really thinking about how they have intuitive healing abilities. I effectively became a crystal hoarder. And so the metaphysics of crystals was something I was deeply interested in. I also became really interested in New Age theologies, especially with Edgar Cayce, who is this really sadly demonically inspired channeler. Got into what's called the Law of One. So a lot of New Age. I dabbled in Kabbalah as well and studying the Tree of Life, especially as it relates to the different Platonic solids. Like, for example, there is what's called a 3D Star of David called a Merkaba, and that's like what your soul, according to this belief, is going to subsume. Like, you take this vehicle in order to transcend the material realms, to obtain enlightenment, if you will. And I was former witch, I guess that's what you would call it. And I practiced the tarot. So I was dabbling in a lot of darkness. I was never one to practice anything heavily dark. That wasn't exactly my practice, but feminism was deeply interrelated with all of that. Like, I bought into the abortion propaganda and unfortunately had one in 2012. And it leaves you deeply, deeply tormented. Like, there's no empowerment from that. It's 100% from hell. And so feminism has a lot of overlap with occultism, like this idea of feminine empowerment, and how occultism has become so mainstream now, especially with astrology and witchcraft. Like, that's just openly proclaiming darkness, even though people don't think that's what's happening. Like, I'm not conjuring Satan. I'm just, like doing a charm. Like, I'm just arranging crystals. Well, you're doing things that are going to cause you pain. So, yeah. And essentially what was the biggest lie for me with feminism was this idea that the female is so oppressed and that she has to go through these series of obstacles that need to be overcome in order to reach some level of liberation, which is just ironically more enslavement. And so I did that for about 10 years. And then I got real tired. Like, you feel like this deep heaviness in your soul that only Jesus can be healing balm for you. And back in 2019, Jay Dyer, I definitely was introduced to the idea of Orthodoxy through him. And then about a year later, I was like, okay, I really need to pursue this. Like, this is for real. So here I am.
Man, it's amazing how many people I come across who how'd you hear about Orthodoxy? Jay Dyer, and it's
he's an interesting guy. Good for him. God bless him.
Yeah, and I've been a fan for like 5 years. So to have when he came on my show that one time, I was pretty excited, and I don't think I did a good job hiding my excitement, but I tried.
Yeah, he's definitely doing a lot for the faith. One of those theological types, which is important and needed because not everyone can take on that cause.
Yeah. So good for him. I mean, he's storing up a lot of treasure in heaven, that's for sure. So I know you already you mentioned that there was a link to a relationship to feminism and occultism. Could you kind of dive into that? I know that I got into, I got into a lot of stuff, but I did notice that in a lot of like Wicca and a lot of this like British traditional witchcraft, a lot of this stuff, there was this tendency to revere the goddess, so to speak. How did they kind of like, oh, women are so oppressed? How did they kind of put those together? But they're worshiping women, like the goddess figure, basically. And is it, tie those pieces together and just explain the connection more between feminism and occultism.
Yeah, well, I was talking about this with a friend. You could argue that the cult of feminism effectively started in the garden with Eve. this idea that you can be something beyond what your actual identity is. And it's all deception, right? Like it's all based in lies. So when, let's say, for example, like me, when I was overtly pagan, I was very much in idolatry, very much worshiping the self, like these fleshly motivations, this idea that self-love and really unchecked self-care can be like some way to make yourself feel better. I mean, I'm also, okay, so this is kind of a side note, but deeply related. I'm in grad school right now for counseling psychology. Lord help me, because it's a very liberal school. And like this idea of you having to like constantly assert yourself as if you were a man is so exhausting, and it's so stupid. It's like, why was I constantly trying to compete with guys? And I do have like some of these remnants of my energetic like consequences to the sin. Like I feel as though I have to remind myself, like, wait, you submit, woman. Like, like there's just this inner anger that has been sadly proselytized upon a lot of women in the West. And all these lies, I think, are effectively germinated in college. Like as an undergrad, you're told about a lot of feminist ideology proponents. And yeah, I think there's overlap with the divine feminine in that, we're essentially replacing who God is with something that's created. Like it's the worship of the creation and not the creator at its most distilled idea.
Nice. Sorry, I was checking for super chats. Nothing yet. But when did you? So let's go back to your story a little bit.
Yeah.
So I know on the timeline, was it? So you saw Dyer was 2019 Orthodox, and then a year later. So it's pretty recent that you actually.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't like, oh, I've been doing this for like 6 months. Like I'm not even a catechumen yet. And I mean, that does start very soon, but I have always at least been really zealous, whether it's for the darkness or whether it's for the Lord. So even in my Protestant days, I was definitely more of those zealot types, like really taking on causes, really wanting to just give my everything. But now I'm finding that there's a way to do that without like pulling too much out of yourself. Like, so in other words, I feel like this is just a way for me to circle back to like the original worship. And I'm so new to all of this, and yet I'm so enamored. Like it's a newfound love for me. And yeah, and so much of it just makes sense. Like what I went through and what I came into agreement with, like contracts that I made with the devil, like these things, they don't seem overtly evil. They don't seem like on the surface level that's actually really harmful to your soul. Like the state of your salvation is in jeopardy. But then once you even remotely whet your appetite with orthodoxy, with a genuine and contrite spirit, like I'm speaking for myself here, I'm like, okay, there's no bottom to this well. There's no stopping it.
Yeah. Do you? Because I kind of I remember because Orthodoxy really is the exact opposite of it's because when I was in doing like like when you do a spell, for instance, you're basically imposing. You think that whether or not you believe in like the Neoplatonic ideas that are behind all of this, that that the idea is more real than the actual thing, and therefore that you can use your energies to manipulate matter, right?
Yeah.
So And I think that's like kind of the basic philosophy behind magic, so to speak. Even if that's real, and I think to some degree it actually is, because it's not all summoning, like spirits and stuff.
No.
So I think, but at its very core, it is the opposite of humility, right? So you're
Yeah.
basically you're imposing your will on creation, as opposed to what what God did by becoming humbling himself, by becoming God incarnate to show us how to become, how to be actually transfigured and become
Yeah.
again. And I think at some point it hit me, it struck me, and I don't remember the exact instance, but at what point did you start to realize something like that? Was it a gradual thing out of feminism and occultism, or when did that whole worldview start to break down?
It was definitely gradual. Like, this isn't some overnight process in the same way that converting isn't going to happen overnight. I think there's a lot of external stimuli that really helped motivate this awareness. See, I realized, like, okay, I've for sure abandoned God. Like, I was putting myself on a mantle. I even was at a point where I was befriending the enemy. Like, I had effectively thought, okay, this guy has just been demonized, like, pun intended. Like, he's not really a bad guy. And so when you're in whatever various stages of your practice, like as a practitioner of tarot, like, I thought I was legitimately being this intuitive person and clairvoyant, and really, like, that's all just like pride. Like, that's all just being full of idolatry. Like, you think what you're doing is somehow organic, but it's not. And I think also too, just being in an abusive relationship, like being ill in a lot of ways, like this idea of, for me, really now understanding like the Orthodox faith is a way to heal you, like physically and spiritually, mostly spiritually. Like, that to me is just so incredible, because like what you put in your body is going to obviously have an impact on you. What you put in your soul is going to do the same thing. And I was into psychedelia. Like, I used to be heavily addicted to cannabis. Like, I had a lot of chemical influences as well. So my neurochemistry wasn't anywhere near where a quote unquote healthy person should be. I put quotes around that because I mean like a clinically healthy person. But yeah, and so it got to a point, like, I think in 2019, especially, I just like took a long, hard look at myself, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, who are you? Who's this woman? Like, the photo that's, my cool comparative diptych. Like, I was just like, who is this girl? Like, she's not really full of the life that she used to have, even in her prot days, and, a series of, like I mentioned, an abusive relationship, but a series of just really toxic relationships that I was a part of, as well as like the other person involved. That all like takes a toll on the soul. So you get to a point where you're either so numb that you literally want to feel something, or and that's actually, like, I think one of the worst paths to go down. Like, you're effectively euthanizing your soul, or you are like shocked something happens, like God's grace is just like, okay. I didn't really have that experience. Like, mine was like a graduation of experiences where I'm like, this is not gonna end well. And I was always a long-term thinker, and everything that was happening was effectively just a short-term outcome. So that played a big role in the ways in which I was just deeply dissatisfied with how I was living my life.
Yeah. Was there like a kind of a, I know for me, I've put this out there, probably not going to talk about it today, but there was I had to get to my lowest low before I could really even be humble enough to embrace Orthodoxy. So you don't have to get too personal, but was there?
Oh no, it's fine. Yeah, and I'm happy to. I mean, the abortion, that was obviously really personal. Like I've had not to like curry pity or sympathy, but I've had people in various situations like tell me like that's really brave. And I'm like, no, it needs to be said. Like this is a lie. And like over 40 million babies were murdered in 2020 alone last year. But I had a severe series of dark nights of the soul, quote unquote. Like when you are at your lowest of lows and you're just, I'm not going to get any better if I just keep living my life like this. And then, yeah, I think there's also this idea too that you think you know what's best for your life, but you don't. You don't. There's no one better than Christ who can put your life back together. And I was a mess. I was all over the place. Like I was definitely someone who was just like constantly looking for my identity in all the wrong places. Like I went through a goth phase. You know, I never felt I never felt like I fit in. So
a goth girlfriend. The goth girlfriend was
I was definitely her. You know, the dark lipstick. And I was a total thought. Like I was finding my value in sexual relationships. Like I was feeling like, oh, well, I'm going to get empowered. Like women, if you're going to put yourself in compromising situations, don't get mad when a guy treats you like garbage. That's just one of the biggest lies that I kept telling myself. Like, oh, well, I get to be mad at him because, you know, he's not my boyfriend after I had sex with him. Well, you kind of lost that battle right when you decided to have sex with them. So, yeah, I just like the whole idea of like sexuality. You know, I went through like an asexual phase. Like I thought, well, I don't have any desire to have sex. Like I had definitely like a bi phase, and I just, you know, I was constantly like looking for something to make sense. But all of that was just more lies on lies. And I didn't think like, oh, Satan's just like throwing his enemies at me. You don't think that when you're in the darkness because he effectively owns you. Like he's your master and you're his property. So I will say like coming out of that, now I have been on his radar and, you know, he's pulling his muscles around and trying to fight me. But, I have Jesus, and that's an important truth. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you chose to be bi, and then you chose not to be bi. Wow, imagine that.
Yeah, it's definitely not what this LGBTQIA plus alphabet soup cult would like to call it. And it's only a matter of time before the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, the 5th edition, which I have on my shelf as a grad student in counseling psychology. It's only a matter of time before that gets removed, you see, because that's transphobic. Gender dysphoria? How dare you speak of such a thing? I mean, in the 80s, homosexuality was taken out of the 3rd edition. So we're not that far off from this mental illness being normalized.
Well, I think right now they're still arguing that the transition surgery is an effective treatment for it. So for now, it's useful for them.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like I would like try and not be feminine. Like I would hate my body. Like if it wasn't body worship, then it was the opposite. Like I had a moment of severe gender dysphoria and body dysmorphia. 2 very distinct mental ailments, but can have a lot of overlap. And sometimes they happen at the same time too.
Do you think some of this mental trauma was perhaps caused by your involvement in the occult?
That, yes, definitely, but also some factors from my childhood. I mean, I was unfortunately a victim of trauma, and I mean, I think most humans are these days, sadly enough. But yeah, I think there's a lot of variables. I was actually talking about that with a group of conservative women in a chat thread on my Instagram. Like we were all talking about our different ailments and grievances over the years. And I think it's a combination of what happens as a child, and then what you go through as you develop. Because a lot of us carry into like this developmental trauma. Like I didn't really have a dad growing up. So yeah, that kind of explains a lot. Like not having a nuclear family. Wow. Just, it's like what we see out in this culture. It's like it's a deliberate attack or something. I don't know. Might be something to that.
Yeah. Yes. So when you had your abortion, how did that? I've never actually had a chance to actually talk to someone like about this so directly, because I did volunteer at a pregnancy clinic at one point where I would kind of counsel the guys that were in there.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah, and I know they always, we would always point to the that hey, this isn't all it's cracked up to be for the woman. They never tell you about the trauma and the even PTSD type stuff.
Yeah.
Could you talk on that a little bit? Like how did that affect you?
So let's see here. I will say, first of all, like it's really important that men and women realize that this impacts not just the woman, this impacts the man as well. And like once a woman is pregnant in this country, a man has no legal rights to that child that he helped create. So men can be traumatized by abortion too. So I want to start with that, number one. Number two, as a woman, there is severe trauma that can come out of this. There's not enough counseling opportunities for women to be available to the idea of either or. So for me, I didn't have health insurance at the time. Right, maybe I did. No, see, Planned Parenthood was like my healthcare provider for most of my adult life. So you can imagine that was also really demonic. But yeah, so I started out by actually going to a local faith-based pregnancy care clinic as well. Like I was like, oh wow, I think I'm pregnant. Like it's so amazing how out of touch women can be with their bodies too. Like for healthy reasons, not like this stupid garbage like, oh, divine feminine. Like no, like if you don't have your period and you're usually a regular menstruating woman, you would think that maybe that's a telltale sign, like number one sign. No. So for me, in my bodily ignorance, finally realized, okay, so I'm not going to have my period. Okay, I'm pregnant. Had a test. Okay. And then so I go to a faith-based clinic and I have a sonogram. And there is statistical evidence to support that if a woman sees her child on that screen, she's least likely to murder her child. I was an anomaly and I did murder my child. So what I think what's most unforgettable of the entire experience though was knowing like, okay, I see my child, right? And I feel my child as I see my child moving. The technician was like, you can feel that? And I was like, maybe 10, 11 weeks. Like unheard of, like mind shattering. I'm like, why? Why is this so unheard of? Like this is, so that alone is unforgettable. And I think also too, like at the time, this was the abusive partner of mine in the past, like he immediately shut down and like locked himself in his room. But then like eventually, once I had scheduled the appointment, he took me to it, stayed for like the entirety of the 3 hours. What feminism is deeply demonic about regarding the abortion agenda is that women don't realize that you're treated like a cog in a wheel when it comes to the abortion clinics. Like you are literally in a clinic with like dozens of other women, and it's just like they pump you in and they pump you out. It's like a conveyor belt. And so I should say for like this particular route, because I had to go through the surgery, like I couldn't do the oral version of it. But yeah, and like you just realize like, that you're just being used in a way that's like so emptying and so traumatic. And it wasn't until years later, like about 4 years later, a counselor had told me, like, you know, you could develop symptoms of PTSD after having an abortion. And dissociation, that's a common symptom of PTSD or any heavy trauma. And so, yeah, I struggle with that sometimes. So, but the fact is that I can speak about this, and there's grace in this, and Christ has healed me and is continuing to heal me. And I can use my story through his grace to tell women that this is going to lead you to some heavy demonic stuff that will take years to unwind. So, yeah, I mean, more women need to hear about this. It's not a form of contraception, and no, it's not healthcare. It's absolutely not.
Sorry, I think I have COVID, but we have a super chat. Kara Maceo, is Brittany a descendant of Alexandre Dumas?
I am, but not directly. Really amazing author, if any of you ever know of his works.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, kind of Monte Cristo is my favorite.
And I know you've already kind of hit on this, but especially by saying that you felt the need to kind of pretend to be a man, basically, assert yourself in masculine things. How does feminism distort femininity, and why is that bad for women?
Ooh, I mean, it's every level, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. So physically, when a woman doesn't care about the way in which she presents herself, right? Like, I used to be super coiffed. I used to have, I used to be a makeup artist by trade too, but I used to like be really coiffed. I used to dress rather immodestly. Like, I'll call myself a thought. Like, I used to be that girl. And then I also would be somehow upset if I was getting male attention. So feminism embeds these lies where it's like, okay, a woman could be walking down the street naked, and if a man looks at her a certain way, it's his fault. It's like, that's not basic biology. Like, a man is actually wired a certain way to be visualized. Like, so, and feminism distorts femininity in terms of gender roles. Like, that's one of the biggest reasons why I was also so downtrodden by these constant stream of lies. Like, I would like to eventually have a family someday, and I don't think a woman is supposed to be this like overpowering figure and a head of household type. Like, the lies of like women being in the workforce, like having to pursue a career. There's a reason why the millennials are having kids much later in life. And by later, I mean like in their 30s, because we were programmed to think that you got to pursue an education. And education inherently isn't necessarily a negative thing, but I mean, to make that your end goal, like, so what? You're going to be in debt now? Like, that's what I'm dealing with. And so I just realized, I'm like, this isn't actually going to serve me well at all. You look at feminists today who are like in their 40s and 50s, whether or not they're a lesbian or like in a relationship, like they're so deeply depressed, especially the fact that like they're barren, like they're literally barren. And their life purpose has been reduced to some ideology that's not going to shape the world in a good way. Like, it's just going to create more divisiveness. So femininity destroys gender roles, or I should say feminism destroys the femininity that should be in gender roles. But it also like destroys femininity. Like, I love the idea of being feminine and not a feminist. Like, when you're a feminist, you think that somehow being feminine is like not to be celebrated. Like, oh, because now we have like this advent of transgenderism. So if I'm a woman, which I can't call myself a woman, I can call myself like an incubator or a menstruator. You know, if I want to use this language in a certain way without being politically correct, then the act of femininity itself, by way of feminism, is just garbage. So in my podcast, I was talking about this in depth, like this third wave feminism, what we're currently experiencing now, way after Gloria Steinem in the 60s, like that was really lukewarm feminism. What we're dealing with now is the feminism that's encapsulating the LGBTQ cult. So you have like a super cult of feminists and like the gay, like transgenders, like it's all a mess. It's all just a big demonic mess. And it's infiltrating everyone's train of thought by like this propaganda programming. So, you know, you go into the school systems, especially, that's a big part of it. Incubator nationalism, exactly. Let's get back to that, please. But yeah, so I think there's just a lot to be said when the idea of femininity itself is somehow not PC. Like, it's wild. And feminism is a form of idolatry. Like, I don't want to worship another woman. I don't want to worship anything that's of this world. I realized that as I went along in my journey. And I've noticed too that the left is just like so vagocentric and like everything is about the vagina. And it's like, it's so grotesquely focused on genitals. Like no, like yoni worship and stuff. I'm like, that's really grotesque and degenerate. Like, I don't think that's really positive at all. It's going to create a lot of mentally ill people is what it's going to do.
Matthew Thompson with the very
How come feminists dye their hair weird colors? Yeah. If you're trying to express yourself, you think you're special. Like, I'm no one special. Newsflash. Like, I'm no one important. But feminists think they are. They think that because they are making $1 less or whatever stupid margin less than a man in a workplace of which they don't even belong, like, you're somehow important. The 19th Amendment makes women look really bad. I mean, we just witnessed that yesterday, right? Like, we have this pseudo vice president who gives women a really bad name. And yeah, I mean, the 19th Amendment was a really big mistake. And feminists think that it was like this great thing that happened for women. It's like, no, it actually isn't. But yeah, women dye their hair weird colors. I used to be that girl. I had like nothing weird, like electric eel or whatever. But yeah, like orange and reds mainly. And then I was blonde, but that's not like a weird color. That's just not natural.
We have your blonde photo in the promo of the promo flyer. So I don't know if anybody's seen that. That's pretty funny. I almost chose a similar one, but that one was actually better. So if you Google yourself that you that one of your university pictures pops up with you looking super feministy with giant glasses. Did you know that? You're muted. You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Is it like really short hair? I went through so many phases. I'm kind of like an assassin like that. It's stupid.
I think you had like bangs in that one. So
well, I will say though, like, I went through some really degenerate stuff in my years, like stuff that is not something that should be spoken about in public. Let's just leave it at that.
Theodore says, is the influence of the occult visible in today's culture?
Yes. I was literally just talking about this yesterday with a friend. There's so much mainstream occult grooming going on. Like, if you look at astrology, for example, and how everyone is obsessed with this like relationship problem that they're creating by being fixated on astrology. Like, astrology I think inherently is pretty benign. It's not as like say demonic as you like, you know, practicing a form of worship and magic, but it's so mainstream. Like, look at the symbolism that's just hidden in plain sight. Like, we have occult imagery on our currency, for crying out loud. Like, we've been indoctrinated with the occult and the imagery of it for decades, for centuries. And I know you being a former Mason, like that's definitely part of Satan's game. Like, he likes to hide himself in plain sight. So if you're an untrained eye, you're not going to know about it. Yeah, exactly, Ray. Super gay.
Let's see. Luthien the Mortal says, is she in West Virginia too? No, but she will be. Jacob.
I am in California, and I do not recommend coming here ever unless you're like passing through.
Yeah. So, anyways, some guy thinks you should be a nun, obviously, but whatever. Oh.
I mean, I thought about it, but I don't personally think I've been given the gift of celibacy in terms of like the whole life thing. So it's kind of a prerequisite for being a nun.
Yeah. Now there's a whole discussion.
It is.
Actually, that's I don't think in the Western monasteries you have to be a virgin to be a monk or a nun. Like in some, there are places where that's a thing, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like divorced or people who have been abandoned by their spouse or are widowed, they become monastics too. So that doesn't really make, that's more like a Oriental Orthodox thing, like Ethiopia. So
like the Coptics.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got like 10 young guys to one woman in parishes. We need mothers. True.
Yeah, true. I mean, a garden's not going to grow itself with just dudes. Like, women are needed in the Orthodox Church.
back to Brother Augustine's incubator nationalism. We need.
Yeah, in his words, he'd love to see it.
The highest calling of a woman is to be an incubator. JK.
Yeah.
The Devour Truth says lots of spiritual elders in the chat. Yeah.
Good. God bless them. Yeah, I think there's something to be said though about feminism and child rearing. Like, when women are told that you shouldn't have kids, you're essentially sterilizing yourself and you're not contributing to anything beneficial. Like, that's, I think, a form of genocide, honestly. If you're going to be taking these birth control pills, if you're going to be under the influence of chemical indoctrination, like chemical warfare, that's what women's birth control is. I tried it once in my life, the hormones, which was technically a low dosage. And I literally went insane. Like, I went so irritable and so moody. Like, I was playing bowling with my boyfriend at the time. And then all of a sudden I just snapped and like had the worst irritable mood swing. Like, the irritability that it put me under was not good. Like, it was really bad. It was really bad. And I can't imagine how women function on higher dosages. Like, that's just insane, you know?
Wow, man, a woman being irritable. Imagine my shock. Never have I
a woman and her emotions. Let's make them more volatile. That sounds like a great idea. Like, the big pharma people are just rubbing their hands. It intensifies. Yeah.
Matthew, anyone who's held hands before marriage is a degenerate Luciferian.
Well, I mean, Mary Magdalene was also a degenerate by nature, but she was equal to the apostles. So there's a lot of women saints that have had their thought pass that I deeply resonate with. Yeah, women get emotional.
Saint Mary of Egypt too, you know.
It was a literal prostitute. Wasn't she considered like the female version of a desert father, like a desert mother? Didn't she live out in the desert?
I mean, I don't know if she's like considered like a desert mother because she hasn't like really written anything that I know of. But yeah,
but like her life.
She was a prostitute, and then she went out to the desert for however long in repentance, and then Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
amazing.
good story for all of us pre-conversion degenerates. So
I mean, there's a huge crown in store for the virgins in heaven, like the martyrs. So if you're still a virgin listening to this show, like, God bless you. That's amazing.
stay that way.
Yeah.
We should. That's another
Yeah.
thing. Like we should be. Like I know that there's people like literally make fun of people for being virgins. Like that's where our society. It's something that should be revered and honored, but in our society we make fun of people that are virgins. Like that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Ray the musician says, "What are your thoughts with women in politics?"
Ooh. So that's a great question. I think we need more women like Lauren Witzke. Incels. Yeah. It's just like internalized misandry. I think we need more women like her, and less women like our pseudo vice president. But I mean, honestly, though, like the 19th Amendment just needs to go away. Just like, can we repeal it? Because I think that'll answer the question, and then that'll kind of keep everything on a tight schedule.
Having experienced some behind the scenes stuff, I'm gonna go out and say that women should not be in politics at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's whatever.
Yeah. I mean,
no further comment from me.
yeah, we don't have enough of like the wholesome women in politics, so it's just already a losing battle.
Yeah, they should be getting married and having kids, or joining the monastery. And
become a monastic. Live the hesychastic life, or just like have a garden, have a bunch of babies. Like, it's not rocket science. Yeah. But I guess it's so oppressive. Like, see, I can't understand this either. How can feminists celebrate this idea of like degenerate BDSM culture, but then the idea of submitting to their husband, like purely and genuinely, is like, oh, it's misogyny. Like, that makes no sense. There's so much hypocrisy in feminism. So much. Like, you're going to tell me you're going to do degrading acts of like self-effacing torment, but you're going to like think getting married is somehow like an act of sin. Like, what? That's weird. I don't know.
That's true. Yeah. So now that you've been introduced to Orthodoxy and you are on your way to becoming a catechumen, how would you say that Orthodoxy itself has influenced your perspective on womanhood?
I totally have a new outlook. Like, it's everything that I couldn't even figure out beforehand. So now, like, when you reassess your life and you figure out that your identity is meaningless and there's no substance to it, like having an actual purpose and finding that it's through Christ, and like there's one way to do it and it's a straight and narrow path, and it's completely revitalizing my soul. Like, I think also too, like the more and more I want to embrace trad femininity, the more I'm like, this is empowering. Like, because I veil full time. Like, the only time I don't veil is when I'm home or I'm with a bunch of sisters in their home and no men are around. Like, I wear it out in public. I definitely obviously wear it to church, but I feel so empowered by the ways in which Orthodoxy has laid out a life for women. And, my outlook has just been completely restored. I think what I had as a cradle Protestant and like those values, they were resurrected, and then Christ gave them a completely different layer of meaning.
Evangelical goofballs probably see you and think you're a Muslim.
Yeah, I get weird looks in public, but it's fine. I mean, people can think I'm a Muslim, whether you're like a weird evangelical or not, but you're about 600 years late. So women in the Orthodox Church, Christian women have been veiling themselves for millennia. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, any final words to tie your thoughts together? Tie it all together?
I would say the Orthodox path for women is one of like the most liberating ways a woman can understand her true passions of what it means to like be a woman. And by passions, I mean like actually enjoying being a woman. And I think too that when you're heavily steeped in the occult and you buy into the lies of feminism, you're only going to end up at a dead end road. And there is a way out. So I ended my episode on the podcast with a positive note. So I'll circle back to that here. There is a way out. I mean, we're asked by St. Paul to expose the darkness, not take part in it. You know, we're not battling against flesh and blood, right? Like in the next chapter in verse 6, or chapter 6 rather, like we're not here to fight against men and women. So what I went through was, yes, my fault, but it just opened this big door for Satan to like come through it. And there's a way out. Like that can go away, but you have to humble yourself and realize that you're not going to get your life back on track on your own strength. And women, I would encourage you to just like fall headfirst into the Lord, because you will be amazed at what his grace is capable of doing. And for a former hoe and a murderess, someone who used to do some really dark things, like there's a way for you to just like reach a new level of sanctification. Yeah. And thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And one thing that the Orthodox Church offers, well, we venerate, for one, constantly the Theotokos, the Mother of God.
Yeah.
And I think she is the ultimate example of femininity and what women should be striving to be. And honestly, we honor her more than any other person aside from Christ, right? So like the highest calling of a woman is to be a mother. Like that's more honorable than being a priest. It's a higher calling than the priesthood. It's the motherhood. Yeah. And I think a lot of people miss out on that. And also, if you're wondering how you should be emulating your appearance as a woman, I think Brittany has that down packed. Just look at the icon of the Theotokos and, maybe that's how you should be dressing. So
thank you, but I can't take any credit. That's all God. I will say I don't own any pants, so I'm just like fully maxi length skirts and dresses. Like I love it. Yeah, I love it. Like I got a text today from a friend. She was like, "Hey, there's like I found like a special for like tights, like you can get them too for $10." I'm like, yes, that's my life now. Yeah.
Brandon says the gospel is we can all be saved from sin no matter our past. Glory to God. Do see a lot of like super self-righteous people that, oh my God, this person did this and did that. Well, like, do you really understand Christianity and repentance and like what it's all about? Obviously not. But
yeah.
I appreciate you coming on. I ask every guest this question without preparing them at all. I need a book recommendation from you, not the Bible.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, because we are, for, again, our schismatic new calendar celebrants are celebrating St. Maximus the Confessor's feast day today, hence why I've been sipping on wine during the show. But on the Cosmic Mystery of Jesus Christ, this is part of his popular patristic series by St. Vladimir Seminary Press. I'm like not even like 100 pages in, I've already wept. It's really good. I know that's going to be a book I'm going to have to reread because St. Maximus is like one of my favorite saints for sure.
Yeah, I actually read that as a catechumen too. I don't think I've read it since I was a catechumen. I should probably hit it up.
Revisit. Yeah, it's definitely something you're going to have to revisit. I already know I'm not going to ever put that book down. So.
Yeah. But anyways, let's see. Devour Truth says, "Glory to God. Thank you, Brittany, for the talk." Okay.
Thanks for listening. Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you, just because I do want to get you a little bit of a boost, not that this is a gigantic channel or anything, but where can people find your podcast? Where can they follow you on social media and all that?
I will start with my two little infants, my two platforms that are in their infancy. So I have on Anchor FM, Womanly Trad is my podcast. And then I also have a blog, womanlytrad.wordpress.com. Those are really two great places to start. And then in my blog is where you can find me on social media. I am not really a big fan of optics, so I'll just leave it at that.
Oh. Well, anyway, everybody go follow Brittany now. Find her podcast, follow her blog, and we're gonna have to teach her about optics so that we gotta stay normie friendly. So that
I guess I'm on Instagram. Like, if you want to find me there, it's furnace_gold, whatever. But I really like the podcast platform because it's just my voice. Like, you don't have to look at me, and I'm trying to be this modestly driven woman, and like taking on the Theotokos identity is pretty good. So, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, when I used to do just the podcast, that was actually pretty nice. Not having to worry about how I looked. Or,
You're like, do I need to groom my beard today? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, that was pretty sweet. I actually left all my suits in Maryland by accident. So here I am in West Virginia without my dress clothes. But whatever, it's all good. Amelia Campbell says, "You are amazing. Welcome to the church." So
that's much appreciated, sis. Thank you.
God willing, you'll become a catechumen very soon.
Yeah. It's been a patience-inducing process. So it's good. Nothing to rush into.
Yeah. Orthodoxy is like, well, hold on. Everybody else is like, convert now, and the Orthodox Church is like, well, hang on.
Yeah, you want to qualify your conversions. You don't want just some randos in the church. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything's a process for us. So
it is.
Even theosis, even salvation is a process. So
yeah, the whole deification thing, that's really humbling me pretty hard right now.
Yeah. So have you put any? I know you're not even a catechumen yet, but have you put any thought as to who your patron saint's going to be?
Yeah, she's actually the name of my laywoman's ministry name, Saint Dymphna. She's a Celtic saint from the 5th century. She's also a Holy Virgin Martyr, so at like the age of 18, 19. She's got an amazing story. I would highly recommend looking her up.
Well, awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd actually had heard of her before you mentioned it on your podcast. I think I did listen to a few episodes of your podcast. So
thanks.
I was like, Saint. Apparently, she's the patron saint of mental illness and anxiety.
Yeah, I think that's like the whole idea of like a patronage it's like a Catholic idea, right? But like nonetheless, she's basically, I mean, that does tie into her wonder working, her relics. So in Geel, Belgium, where her remains are, her relics, she has healed many people of various neurological and psychological problems, mentally ill. She has essentially been this incredible healer in that area where she died in present-day Geel, Belgium. And there's been sanatoriums built after her. So she's incredible. She's definitely a womanly figure to aspire toward, for sure.
So, no, that's we do that too. Like in Orthodoxy, we have like patron saint of this or that. So
Yeah, well then, yeah, she's like patron saint of runaways and sexual assault victims and incest. I mean, her father was mentally ill and tried to rape her, and she's like, no, and then he kills her. So, yeah, yeah.
TRN slash says, "Will Jonathan Pajot come on your show?" I don't know. I will. It's actually a decent idea. I have a spreadsheet of people, like literally like almost 100 of past, current guests, and people that I want on the show. So maybe I can add him. And then I like it's like a sales. It's almost like follow up in sales. Like I actually will hit people back up. You know, it's like a whole process to have as many guests on the show as I do. Although I have started to do more solos in recent months. So Ray the musician gave me that idea. He was like, why don't you do some solo episodes? We want your opinions. And then people actually received them quite well, better than I thought. But anyways, Matthew Thompson says, get the real Med White. That will probably happen. I had some of his associate on. What was his name? My mind is blanking. But yeah, I'll probably bring the real Med White on at some point. Anyways, I appreciate you coming on, Brittany. I appreciate everybody watching.
Thank you.
And let me do one last check. No super chats today, but that's okay. I still love you all. And next week, I think I will be solo, Ray. So anyways, I will see you all next week.